Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon. I'm here with Jake Ziegler. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. And this year, we're tackling the year 1953, even though one of the movies that we're talking about didn't come out in the United States until 20 years after its initial release.
Yeah, like 19 years later. This was 1972 when it came to the States, yeah.
Crazy stuff. So that movie is Tokyo Story, which Jake just finished watching like 12 hours ago. Tokyo Story is a loose adaptation of the movie Make Way for Tomorrow, which we have already covered on this podcast and both loved. That movie kind of, I think, took us both by storm because I didn't really know anything about it.
Absolutely, yeah. Tokyo Story, it's weird that I knew much more about Tokyo Story than I did Make Way for Tomorrow.
100%. And I watched Tokyo Story right after I watched Make Way for Tomorrow, which is how it wound up here. Mm-hmm. I don't even remember what I had on this list originally, and I was like, screw whatever that was. Tokyo Story.
Yeah.
Actually, looking at my 1953 list, that makes sense. Tokyo Story is about an elderly couple who goes to see their children. They have four living children, but 5 children they see because they're still in touch with the widow of one of their sons who died during World War II. And like Make Way for Tomorrow, if you listen to that episode of ours, their children are crap and they treat them bad. The plot details don't matter so much because this is a real tone sort of movie. But what did you think of Tokyo Story? This was directed by Yasujiro Ozu and is probably his most known movie.
I think so. Yeah, that's probably right. But yeah, I mean, this movie's beautiful. It's been on my list for a long time to have seen. I think when you and when we had Professor on, we talked about like our big Never Did It's, and this was one for me. And I can't remember if I knew it was on the list or not, but I just knew it was still a big Never Did It for me. And I intended to watch it right after Make Way for Tomorrow, but then life happens. I didn't get to watch it. So thank you for updating the list or whatever to finally push me and give me the reason to sit down and watch it. But yeah, I mean, this is an amazing movie. It's definitely not for the impatient. It certainly moves at a very leisurely pace, I think it could be generously described as. But there's so much cool stuff going on, just the way Ozu. This is my first Ozu movie. Again, I know him by reputation, but I haven't seen any of his movies until now. So I had read a little bit about what Ebert had written about this movie. Of course, he loved it. But just the way the camera moves and how it's like super stationary for most of the movie. Like there's not a lot of cuts. It's real low to the ground. Was another thing that I really noticed in this. I was like, and I thought it was like, man, am I seeing things ever? But then I read Eber's review. It's like, nope, I'm not seeing anything. That's what he's doing, and he's doing that on purpose. So visually, it's really kind of a neat experience too. You just don't see movies made quite like that. Even back then, I can't think of anything like visually that kind of looked all that similar. And then, yeah, I mean, the story, if you connected with Make Way for Tomorrow at all, I think Tokyo Story would do similar things for you.
Definitely. What's funny is when we watched Make Way for Tomorrow, I remember thinking all these children are sort of equally bad. And then there's one who's a little bit extra bad. And then in Tokyo Story, there's one who's a lot extra bad.
Yeah.
Shige is just like the worst person in the world.
Oh, yikes.
And it's amazing that the stakes are so low. And her giant offense is she's rude to her parents after, the one big thing in the movie happens, which is a thing that will happen to everyone. Her big offense is she wants some clothes. And she asks for them at a really rude time.
Yeah.
But you hate her. Like, just that one thing makes you hate her so much. And it's a real testament to the woman who plays Noriko, who is the daughter who lives with her parents. Sorry, that's not Noriko. Noriko is the daughter-in-law. The daughter who lives with her parents is Kyoko. Wow, my brothers and sisters are the worst kind of moment right after that. And it brings the whole movie together. I'm struggling with how to talk about this because on the one hand, I just want people to watch it. And I don't want to spoil anything. But on the other hand, the plot is so much less important than how people react to what goes on in the movie. And you can't get that unless you watch the movie.
Right. It's hard to really put it into words. And when we do our Eraserhead episode next week or whenever that one comes out, I had the same kind of experience where my wife asked me, she goes, well, what's it about? I'm like, I don't know. Like, you just kind of have to watch it. And Tokyo Story is a little, I mean, obviously in a very, very different way, but like, yeah, you can kind of ask them like, what's Tokyo Story about? And you can it's about our, a family's relationship, really. I mean, there's not like a long plot description for it. It's just about the elderly parents and their adult children and the grandchildren, just trying to relate to each other and, just trying to, the grandparents just wanted to spend some time with everyone because they, they're getting a little older. Although it's funny, they're like, in their late 60s, like, it's so old. They're like, it's ancient to me in your late 60s. Like, oh my God, my parents are in their 70s now. So yeah, there's not really a whole lot of like plot description to speak of. And it's just, like you said, it's a tone, it's a mood. It's lovely. I mean, it's sad, of course, but it's also, it feels, I hate to use the word, it feels real, but like, it just feels like, they really really get into these characters, and it doesn't feel like a lot of movie contrivances in this or anything. It's just these characters and how they exist and relate to each other.
Yeah. I don't think it's dumb to say it feels real. I think
Okay.
that's fine. I think that it does feel real. The only thing that feels unreal to me is you don't get this information until pretty far into the movie. Father, who's like very soft spoken, his name's Shukichi. We learn halfway into the movie that he had been an alcoholic while the kids were growing up, and when he gets drunk, the night that he's on his own, which is totally taken from Make Way for Tomorrow. The whole plot of Make Way for Tomorrow, for those who didn't listen to that episode or haven't seen that movie, and it's really hard to find that movie actually, which is a problem. It should be streaming much more easily than it is. The patriarch and matriarch of this family lose their home and they need to go live with their kids, but it takes place during the Depression, so none of their kids actually have room for them. One kid on the West Coast there, or no, not on the West Coast. Well, anyway, one kid in one part of the country, and it's all on the East Coast, but I think just farther north and south. The mom, that's in New York, and one kid takes the dad, and I think that's maybe...
No, I thought the dad goes to California because he needs the warm weather for his...
That's at the end of the movie, though.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
That's like they're never going to see each other again deal. That's the similarity, is that they're separated. The whole point of the movie is that the grandmother and the grandfather are separated from each other. And in Tokyo Story, that only happens for a short amount of time, just one night, because the daughter is so selfish. She can't find a different place to do her hairstyling consultation, so she has the mom and dad have to spend one night apart from each other, and the mom goes and stays with her daughter-in-law, and they bond, and it's a beautiful scene where we learn a lot about the daughter-in-law. That might be my favorite
scene in the movie, actually, when they have their scene together. I love that.
And then the dad goes and parties with a couple friends of his from back in the day, and they get wasted and talk about how crappy their kids are, and they sort of like lay that out as an inevitability of aging, that it's not so much that our kids are crappy, but that they have their own lives and they don't have time for it. And then when he comes home, the daughter Shige is so offended because alcohol ruined her childhood, in her opinion.
Right.
And later in the movie, Shukuchi, when talking about his life, he relays sort of that same message to Kyoko, and says like, I'm alone now, and that's going to be hard for me, but this is the end for everyone. And that sort of spoils that Tomo doesn't make it through the movie alive, which doesn't. There's no death in Make Way for Tomorrow. There's not even like well, the dad is sick, but he's less sick than he's led to believe, and his mom and his awful daughter sends him up to California because she doesn't want him.
Yeah.
So it's interesting I think it's so interesting to watch these movies compared to each other. I think it's also really interesting to watch this Ozu movie against the movies that it has influenced. So the writer of this movie is a guy named Kogo Noda, and as you can guess, the filmmaker Kogo Noda is heavily influenced by Ozu and Kogo Noda.
I popped when I saw that. So I was like, I know that. Like, I did the Leo thing or the Walter Matthau thing for you. Yeah.
My man.
Yeah. Yep.
So if you watch a movie like Columbus feels a lot, at least stylistically, like Tokyo Story, a little bit less so After Yang,
which we also covered on this podcast.
Which we're fully steeped in Kogo and Ozu. And then of course, like you mentioned, the low to the ground shooting. Now a lot of that is in service of, most of these are just meetings of the family, just time spending with the family, and Japanese families sit on the floor, so the camera's on the floor.
Yeah. It's such an interesting perspective. Yeah, we just don't get that like in American films or really any other films.
You don't really get that in other Japanese films, even though they're sitting on the floor, because they're just shot differently. I was thinking about The Funeral, which is a Juzo Itami movie. Juzo Itami made Tampopo, and The Funeral deals with a lot of the same subject matter as Tokyo Story, although there's more plot in The Funeral. The dad's having an affair, and all kinds of stuff happens while he's dealing with the death of his parent. But they don't shoot that movie that way. It's very specific to this filmmaker. Yeah. And then, of course, you have Wes Anderson, whose style is just Yasujiro Ozu's style. And I was worried that because of that, you wouldn't like this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I know you have mixed feelings about Wes Anderson.
I do, but I'd say they're more positive than negative. Like, I probably like more of his movies than dislike. I think if we wait him out, in fact, we should do a Wes Anderson episode sometime, because my wife is a big Wes Anderson fan, so she'd like to go through all the movies. It might be a fun episode to do. Yeah,
for sure. The only one I haven't seen in a while is Rushmore, and I'd like to rewatch The French Dispatch, because I feel like I was kind of distracted when I watched it during COVID. And then he's got a new one coming out. The Phoenician Scheme is coming out later this year, so we can do it for that.
Oh yeah, that'd be a good time for it.
Perfect. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Tokyo Story. And obviously, it didn't get any Oscars because it didn't come out for 20 years.
No, and even then, I don't think it was like an official release. I think it just started making rounds at like some screenings, some like special screenings and things. So I'm not sure that it ever had an official run in the United States.
You and I both watch a lot of animated films, and we're both interested in animated films that aren't from the United States, but those count on people translating them into English. And a lot of, I'm finding, like we talked about Dongeng Sang Kanchil, the Netflix, it's now a Netflix movie from Malaysia. I was looking at other cartoons out of Malaysia, which look like they all suck, but I don't think they've been translated into English, and honestly, for me, thank God. But yeah, there's lots of movies, just like not so much from Japan, because Japan has such a big and robust film industry, but a lot of movies from outside the United States will just never make it here, or just never subtitled in English.
It's just funny to think about just how different. I mean, I know it was 50, 60, whatever years ago, but yeah, just to think that there's this movie that is, at this point hailed as one of the greatest of all time, frankly, it makes like the top of those Sight and Sound lists and other critics polls and everything, and it just like existed for 20 years with only a small portion of the world ever seeing it. Like, it's just kind of mind-blowing,
For sure. All right, well, let's shift gears into a movie that a lot of Americans saw.
Yes.
From Here to Eternity. You recommended this. Why don't you take it away?
Well, I did, and I had a limited selection from 53, other than the two that we're talking about today, and Disney's Peter Pan. I actually don't have anything from 53 on my list. So, luckily, though, From Here to Eternity is a movie I would have recommended anyway. It's a big American movie. Yeah, this is like as American as apple pie kind of movie. And it was the Best Picture winner that year. Huge at the Oscars. It was very popular. I mean, it's got Burt Lancaster and Frank Sinatra and Deborah Kerr, Montgomery Clift. Big cast, this big story. It's kind of a quintessential, in a lot of ways, 50s movie. Like I said, even though I had a limited selection, I still think this was a good choice. And the story, it's is about, it's a kind of a war movie.
It absolutely becomes one at the end.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's a lot of different things going on in it, but the movie takes place in Hawaii. The main character is, I can never remember the names, but I know it's Burt Lancaster.
He has a great movie name.
Sergeant Milton Warden. That's a sergeant, if I've ever heard one. Yeah. So Burt Lancaster is, he's the sergeant at this base, and the movie kind of kicks off with Montgomery Clift's character, Robert E. Lee Pruitt, which is like, oh, that's a bad name for a hero. But, he's Montgomery Clift, and he's distractingly handsome, so we can get past that.
Shockingly short. In fact, aside from Burt Lancaster,
really?
This is like the shortest cast I've ever seen. Like, Sinatra was a tiny person. Montgomery Clift, I think, was 5'10", 5'9", like my height at best.
Yeah.
I was watching, well, we'll get to this next week, but you mentioned Eraserhead, so I'll mention New York, New York. When I was watching New York, New York, I thought, God damn, De Niro's so small.
Yeah.
These guys are tiny. It makes Lancaster look like a giant.
Yeah, he's so, oh my gosh, yeah, he towers over Sinatra especially.
Mm-hmm.
So Robert E. Lee Pruitt comes in. This is Montgomery Clift, and he's known as a boxer from his former locations. He did boxing, but there was an incident where he damaged someone's eyesight, and he doesn't want to box anymore. But the guys at his new place, they really want him to box because that would be really helpful for the army and for morale and whatever else. But he just really doesn't want to. So there's conflict there. And then you've got Frank Sinatra, who's kind of the hothead soldier who befriends Pruitt, and they kind of make things difficult for their superiors. Now, Milton Warden, Burt Lancaster, he's more sympathetic to them, but you've got a couple of other villains in there. You've got Ernest Borgnine, Sergeant Fatso Judson, which is just, to compare what Borgnine does in this movie to Marty is just, I had almost a hard time reconciling that the first time I saw them, because they couldn't possibly be any more different. The movie just kind of follows the conflicts between them. You've got romantic interests that are introduced. Deborah Kerr plays Karen Holmes. She's married to the captain, but she, secretly wants to be with Burt Lancaster. And then you've got Pruitt, who meets a woman at a club. Maybe a nightclub that he meets and instantly falls for. She's played by Donna Reed, who of course is fabulous in the movie. So yeah, there's really a lot going on. And then plus, like, that's all against the backdrop of, World War II going on, and, a big event that happened in Hawaii for World War II. Spoiler alert. Big, epic. The scope of it is big. It looks big. It feels big. And then a fun personal note, that scene where Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr are kissing in the ocean, like the waves come up and splash on them. I've been there. I've been on that beach in Hawaii, and it's pretty cool.
That is neat. I've never been to Hawaii. I'd really like to go.
That's awesome. Yeah, super fun.
So I'm glad you recommended the movie. I liked it a lot. I felt very surprised when, spoiler alert, as you mentioned, Pearl Harbor happens at the end of the movie. Like, I didn't realize that. I must have said at some point that they were on Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, I think this is early in the movie, yeah.
But I just didn't expect the Japanese to attack at the end of the movie, because it doesn't feel like like you said, for a long time it's a comedy. It's like a workplace comedy. where, as you mentioned, Clift and Sinatra are like screwing with their superiors, especially Sinatra. Yeah, I was really caught off guard. I thought at most this was going to be like A Few Good Men, where the issue was that there was obvious abuse happening, specifically from Borgnine's character, who's the villain of the film.
Captain Holmes, to a lesser degree too. He's not quite as villainous, but he's definitely an antagonist.
And he's allowing abuse to happen in pursuit of winning this boxing championship. And also there's like the Nazi looking sergeant who wants to box, who wants to like fight Robert E. Lee Pruitt and gets his ass kicked, which is great. And like my favorite scene in the movie is when he finally
That's amazing. Yeah, what a great scene. Yeah.
So I thought it was a different kind of movie. And then this really gnarly Shawshank Redemption style torture stuff that's happening under the radar in the brig by Borgnine. And you mentioned that Borgnine couldn't be more different between here and Marty, and I think a lot of that is owed to how he's shot. Let's say 70% of it is the characterization. Fatso is like the meanest, worst guy in the world, but Marty is a lot of like medium and close-up shots, and he's always shot very warmly. The music around him is always very warm, and here it's a lot of like far shots, and he's towering. Like I said, Sinatra and Clift are very small, and Borgnine's a big dude, and he's towering over these guys, and he's always holding a knife, a switchblade. He's crazy. Like you, I had a really hard time like don't do this to Ernie. And I've mentioned on this podcast before that I have medium feelings about Lancaster in general. I was first exposed to him in The Kentuckian, which is Walter Matthau's first movie, and I thought he was super boring. There's one great shot in that movie where Lancaster has to run across a shallow lake to attack a guy before the guy can reload his gun and shoot him. It's so cool. It should be iconic, but the movie's not good, so it's not. But the movie's largely boring. And then you've got a movie like not The Secret of My Success.
Sweet Smell of Success?
Sweet Smell of Success, yeah. Which is beloved, and I just don't like that much, but after watching From Here to Eternity, I kind of bought in. And like I mentioned, I was very surprised at the Pearl Harbor stuff at the end, but I shouldn't have been, because the movie is called From Here to Eternity, which is from a poem about how life for a soldier is hell. I don't know why I didn't think to...
what, you didn't make an obscure poem reference immediately? You didn't get that one right away? God, right? We should cancel the podcast.
I just feel like you should know some stuff. Now I know.
I know that I only knew that because I'd seen From Here to Eternity a couple of times, and I think I'd studied it in one of my college classes. So, like, yeah, I did know that, but, like, just watching it offhand, of course, not everyone would know that.
Yeah. So Sinatra won the Oscar for this, and I think he's very good. And everyone else was nominated as well, right? Lancaster was nominated.
Oh yeah, let's just hit as long as we're talking about, let's hit the Oscar list, because it was nominated for 13 Academy Awards, winning 8 of them. Winner Best Picture, winner Best Actor in a Supporting Role, Frank Sinatra. Winner Best Actress in a Supporting Role, Donna Reed. Fred Zinnemann wins for Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Black and White, Best Sound Recording, and Best Film Editing. So 8 for 13 is incredible. The ones that it did not win, you had Montgomery Clift and Burt Lancaster were both nominated for Best Actor and lost. Deborah Kerr was nominated for Best Actress in a Leading Role, and she lost. And then Best Costume Design, Black and White, and Best Music Scoring of a Dramatic or Comedy Picture. It lost those, but still, 8 for 13 is, that's one of the best totals ever.
So I'll say this about Clift and Lancaster. So I've watched Stalag 17. Obviously, it's Billy Wilder. It's great. But So William Holden's performance in Stalag 17 is good, but there are better performances in Stalag 17, and some of them were nominated for Academy Awards that year. And Holden is good, but the role is not that meaty, and I'd say both Lancaster and Clift deserved it more, but they probably canceled each other out.
I think that's how it usually happens when you get multiples like that.
Deborah Kerr, I have to call out, because I am so sick of British people doing American accents. They are so bad. In fact, only Australian people should be allowed to do American accents because they're so much better at it.
They are.
With the grand exception of Deborah Kerr. She is so convincing with an American accent here. And it's wild because we know her from playing 3 roles in The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Yep.
3 roles that she's amazing at. But she's so British in that movie, and she's so American here. She was a real amazing talent.
Definitely. And she lost to, I just pulled it up here, she lost to Audrey Hepburn in Roman Holiday, which is, I get it.
I actually agree with that call. I recently watched Roman Holiday and was like, Audrey Hepburn is undeniable.
Cool. I need to watch that. That's another one that's been, on my list forever.
Okay, so quick story about Frank Sinatra in this movie. That is a big part of movie history. So the scene in The Godfather where a horse's head appears in a bed as a means of intimidating someone is supposedly based, and I think this has been debunked, but was supposedly based on Sinatra asking the mafia to intimidate the folks at Columbia Pictures to give him this role. Mario Puzo has since said that was not the inspiration, but who knows if that's real. The other rumor is that I think Sinatra was married to Ava Gardner at the time, and she used her connections to get him the role.
But I mean, you see him in it, it's like, well, he's pretty good. Like right away, I mean, he's really good in this role. I mean, he does the best friend part really well, but he's kind of got his own kind of side story going on with Fatso as well. So he really does add a lot to the movie. I mean, regardless of how he got it, I don't think it was a detriment to the film at all.
No, he won Best Supporting Actor.
He's great, yeah.
He and Borgnine were good friends, and they called each other by their names from this movie for the rest of their lives.
I read that too. I love that. Makes me feel a little better about them turning Ernest Borgnine into a bad guy.
Not just a bad guy, like a despicable villain.
That's funny. My first exposure to Ernest Borgnine was in that Simpsons episode where they go on the river rafting trip.
Mine too, but my first actual knowledge of him was Basketball.
Oh, that's right.
Death by Hot Dog.
Basketball. Wow, I kind of forgot about that movie.
So you don't have a list for this year? I do.
No, I mean, if I were to rank them, the ones I have, I'd probably go. Obviously, Peter Pan would be number 3 there, the most racist movie in Disney's canon. Probably. More racist than Song of the South?
Okay, let's talk about it. So I actually think The Aristocats is the most racist movie in Disney history.
Yeah.
If only because of the party scene where the band is playing and the Asian cat uses chopsticks to play the piano is just like, no, look, you can watch it. We're detached from it from a lot of years. You can have fun with it. But it is, I have Asian relatives, and I was like, I don't know if I'd want to watch this with them. Peter Pan, that song is insane. It's truly insane. And then the thing about Song of the South, why I'd say both Peter Pan and Aristocats is more racist than Song of the South, is yes, Song of the South is in post-antebellum South, but it's sort of approving of Jim Crow era America and saying that slaves might have enjoyed being slaves, which is despicable.
Why you don't see that one anymore?
Right, but I'm genuinely shocked that, and they put the warnings on Disney Plus ahead of time. Yeah, but I'm genuinely shocked that at least that those scenes, which also don't really do anything for the movie, are still in the movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so where would you put the other two?
It's really tough between the two because I love them both, and they're both they're so different. When I did it this morning, I had Tokyo Story 2 and From Here to Eternity number 1. Now I feel like maybe I'd flip that, but I mean, either way, I highly recommend both of these movies. I think they're probably amongst the best that decade. The 50s has a lot of great movies, but yeah, both get a hearty recommendation from me.
Awesome. So I have a top 5. At number 5, I have Ugetsu, which is Kenji Mizoguchi's. It's billed as a horror movie, but it's not at all a horror movie. It's pretty good. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's about these 4 people, these 2 couples during a war, and how they want to take advantage of the economy basically during the war. Well, one of them has a lot of pottery and he wants to sell it in these towns, but at the same time their hometown is about to be under siege by one of the armies. So their wives, these 2 guys, their wives want them to flee with them, and they'd rather go to town and sell this pottery. That's one guy. The other guy who helps him wants to be a samurai, and the other guy sort of stumbles into killing one of the enemy soldiers, a high-ranking enemy soldier, and becomes this big samurai. And then the movie is about the fallout from those decisions, what happens to their wives and their children and their village. It's a great concept. I was a little left cold by it. There's a bit of ghost story stuff going on, but I didn't think any of that stuff was particularly interesting. The more interesting stuff was the familial stuff. The number 4 is Roman Holiday. For those who don't know, this is Audrey Hepburn's breakout role. The movie says introducing Audrey Hepburn. She'd been in movies before this, but this was her first starring role. I guess the story there is that Gregory Peck thought he would look like an ass if he was billed ahead of her because she was about to be a big star. So he insisted she be billed first, even though he is the main character in the movie. And the only way to do that was by saying introducing, which I don't buy it, because that also usually goes at the end of credits.
Yeah.
Anyway, great movie about Audrey Hepburn's a princess. She is annoyed about being a princess. She runs away for a night. Gregory Peck is a journalist who wants to get the scoop on her life, and he has a bet going with his editor that he can get it. It's a lot of money by the standards of the time. And then they end up having a really fun night together, the 2 of them, Peck and Hepburn. Mm-hmm. It's a really sweet romantic comedy. Has one of the best endings of any romantic comedy I've ever seen. Not a happy ending in the traditional sense.
And you're not a big Gregory Peck guy either.
No, but he's totally tolerable in this. Although, as he's walking around, I'm like, how is Casanova Frankenstein here a leading man? I just don't get it. But that leads into From Here to Eternity is my number 3. I like it a lot, and I have Tokyo Story just ahead of it. But yeah, I have them both ranked at 4 stars, and honestly, they both probably deserve to be rated higher. I have
Here to Eternity at 5 and Tokyo Story at 4.5. But like I said, I mean, it's picking nits. They're both great.
Totally. And then at number 1, I have Billy Wilder's Stalag 17, rated at 4.5 stars. Love this movie. Like I said, I don't think William Holden deserved Best Actor, but the way he integrates in with the rest of this big ensemble cast is great. And that's the issue. It's really more of an ensemble movie. It's sort of a comedy version of The Great Escape. A bunch of guys are in a German prison camp. There's a spy informing on these guys, and they don't know who it is. And William Holden is accused over and over again because he's sort of a huckster. Like, he's always making deals with the guards to get booze and to play, to gamble and to go see the ladies at the Russian camp next door. It's really funny. In fact, Robert Strauss and Harvey Lembeck play these two side characters. Lembeck plays like the quirky Jew, and Harvey Strauss plays like the big dummy. And Strauss was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and I would have killed for there to be a sequel just about the two of them goofing around. Can't recommend Stalag 17 enough. Billy Wilder does it again. What a surprise.
Yeah, shock.
Okay, so that'll do it for 1953. We'll be back next week with two movies we mentioned, Eraserhead and New York, New York.